There he is.
There he is.
I see people.
Hang on, I'm
Can
turning
you
everything
hear
else.
Perfect.
We
Yep.
can hear
Now
you.
we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm just turning the other on.
Do your thing.
All right, sorry, I had music playing and stuff. Hey, dude.
Howdy, man.
How are you?
Pretty good. Sorry, it took me a while to download software that I apparently needed for that.
You know, it's tricky. It tells you have the option to do it, but it makes it seem like you don't have the option. Like you can just go through your browser on that software, but it runs really good once you download the software too. So
It's too late now. We have you. Well,
I just clicked the button and I hate us. So I don't know what it is. But there you go.
we're receiving your credit card information now. Please stand by.
Pretty much. Good luck with it.
Yeah, you can have it.
You can get anything off of that thing. You're welcome.
well, welcome, man. I sent you the basic format of what we do here, but you know, we're gonna kind of roll into our normal show. Do our standard setup where we come in and say our little intro line, and then we'll discuss a little segment right at the beginning. We'll talk about some dynasty depression and a few different things. We'll also mention that I know you do the ranking stuff over there at DLF, and Jeremy does that too. So we'll kind of talk about that real briefly, and as we move into a few other things, and then we'll do our hot cushion segment, and followed by that, Jeremy's a clinical psychologist here, so he will take us through a psychological exercise at the end of our show.
Not sure I'm up for that. Yeah, I'm not. Obviously, I read everything you sent, so obviously that's just what a respectful human being would do. But let's just pretend like I don't know a single thing.
Totally fine. Our show requires zero preparation.
Good. Then I'm in the right place.
It essentially
you might qualify for a staff role, actually.
So yeah, it essentially is that. I mean, we're basically running through a session of therapy, and in the middle of it, I do some of my therapy where I kind of put you on my hot cushion and make you uncomfortable. So that's therapy for me. The rest of it's therapy for the rest of our listeners and hopefully our guests.
You have a hot cushion, nice. No, what are we roughly talking about? Let's say.
So the generic topic is going to be, we talk about dynasty depression, or getting depressed with your team a little bit, and
well, so I would say it's more broadly rankings and like beyond rankings, just the psychology of rankings. So I was going to ask you a couple questions about how you start with rankings, but then really try and dig into the psychological aspect, like when you notice that you're different than other rankers or consensus or whatever it may be, and then pull in this kind of dynasty depression concept, which is like, you draw on a personal experience with a player. And so dynasty depression is something that we kind of coined, and it's follows the psychological and clinical mechanism of depression, which is, you take one thing and you overgeneralize it and exaggerate it, and it assumes the whole concept of that thing or player. And then all of a sudden, every time you hear that person's name, you're lower on them, or you don't have them on your team, or you don't want them or want anything to do with them. And so how does that play out in rankings and how you play as a dynasty player?
I get you.
And we'll probably try to apply that a little bit to, I know you've expressed your anguish in being able to perform well during Scott Fishbowl, so I think that plays well into what we're talking about with rankings and doing good players, or having a good analysis of players, and then rolling that into something weird and crazy format like Scott Fishbowl, and all of a sudden it just didn't work. And was it something that you did, or was it something that the team did? And just a few of those things. And we'll run out of time in that segment, I'll tell you that right now. We always do.
And I'll say that while that sounds maybe complex or detailed, that's on us, and we're really just here to have you kind of reflect without real preparation or numbers or data or specific players in mind. It's more just what happens to come in your mind in response to that question, and that's kind of like what doing therapy. We don't ask for a lot of preparation. It's what's important is going to come out in the room. So that's what we hope to have
All
here.
right then. Okay, but like I just pulled up 3 different sheets, so
Totally fine. We've got a lot of stuff
I've got
pulled up
like
too. But
I always have like 7 projects going for no matter what people mention. I'm like, oh yeah, I was creating a rankings model. I forgot to finish it. I could pull that up, but no, we can just do it
Yep,
more in general. It's fine.
pull up
I was
whatever.
actually thinking about something similar a little while ago about why you play, so I guess that'll fit in. I'm good.
Yep. Pull in whatever.
Well, some of that'll come up through conversation. You'll notice. I mean, basically, what we talk about is going to be a lot less current event specific and more broad in general about, like, okay, yeah, if we talk about a player, we're going to use that player as a reference model for that type of player. If we talk about, Jared Cook, it's going to be about an older tight end that's really talented that Jeremy loves so much, and it won't be about Jared Cook
Will
himself.
not be.
Okay.
Ignore everything that Kyle said up until he's a shitty player. That's my
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Jeremy
Gotcha.
does not like him. So
All right, we're rolling on everything here. So whenever you gentlemen are ready.
awesome. Well, I'll get
Go for
the set up over here.
I make a lot of noise, by the way, so I tend to mute myself on occasion. Just if that's a feature around here, yeah.
It is. Yep. You just hover over the screen, I think, or click on it, and you can grab
Yeah,
that. And you
I
also notice,
click.
like, up in the
I have the urge to interrupt someone almost every 5 seconds, so mute both.
well, if you click on the background screen, you can also see that there's like a little button up in the top right that you can click to make everything go to grid view, so you can see everybody all at once instead of
Right.
the single person. So if you want to do that, that's always a little better.
And that concludes our WebEx orientation.
You're now certified.
Well, fantastic. Welcome to Dynasty Self Help Podcast, helping you self-actualize in the hobby of Dynasty Fantasy Football. It's a show that allows our listeners to sit on the couch with me and get therapeutic lessons from a professional and his yuck monkey. I'm Kyle LaPointe, downloading my thoughts to you from Fort Worth, Texas, and joining us from State College, Pennsylvania is my co-host, Jeremy Schwob. How are you now?
Thumbs up.
All right, that's so great. Today, we're going to tell you what we told you with a little bit of a dive into dynasty depression and how it relates to somebody's lack of success in the Scott Fish Bowl. Reminding me that someone is sitting here on the couch next to me. Jeremy, can you introduce me?
I can. We have a pretty esteemed guest today. So we have DLF senior writer Peter Howard. We know him very well in the community. He does projection work also, I think, over at Player Profiler, if you're still doing that. He's got great databases, silky smooth voice. What else to say? Peter, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, yeah, I'm not sure any of that applies to me, like, at all. For a start, I definitely shouldn't be on a podcast that uses a word like self-actualize. Like, I've been sent from the rest of the world that don't use words like that to say, just stick with like the yuck master or whatever you said. That's kind of valuable. I'll be happier there. Also, like, I don't get, as from what I'm understanding of your definition of dynasty depression, I don't know I get it, because, like, I guess I used to, but I figured out pretty quick you've kind of got to decide what you're playing for. And if you just focus on playing the way you enjoy or playing for the things that you want, like, I know I get depressed about my dynasty teams very often. I get upset if they don't work out my way, but I also know, like, that's why I play. Like, but we can get into that, but like the sweet and the sour is literally the thing about fantasy football. And standing on a hill and falling off and breaking your leg is kind of the fun for me. So once I accepted that and started literally playing for it, it got a lot more sweet, I guess, instead of sour.
Sure. Yeah, and it's a good point.
I was going to say all the other things that weren't
Yep.
true. Like, I'm not esteemed, and no one gives a crap where I work or what I do, and it's fine, guys. Like, don't worry about it. It's cool. I'm just a jamoke willing to sit here and say stupid things for an hour or so about football, and hopefully you can make fun of some of them. Like, let's go.
Well, we might have to work on some of that self-confidence there and some of that self-image of yours, because I think there's a lot of people that really value your opinion and your insights and what you do for the community. So
Oh no! Don't be fooled. Like I'll fool psychopaths. Like I have an ego the size of the Empire State Building, and I spend my life trying to keep it down because I hate those people. Like that's it's a reverse problem here. Don't worry. Like no one that speaks into a microphone once a week or several times a week telling people what they think doesn't have an ego. Like okay, like
sure.
Like you kind of got to have a little bit of an ego to think anyone would give a crap.
Well, that's why I said
you try to make it entertaining to justify it, but that's about it.
Sure. Well, I use the neutral phrase of self-confidence issues that could be overconfidence or underconfidence. So
don't
covered my
nerd
bases
me,
there.
boy. I'm not here to be taught. I'm here to be made fun of. Let's go.
So I've
That's
got
right.
a GIF that's queued up, and I just haven't been able to use it yet. But there's a scene in the movie Sing where the frog band breaks up, and the one guy comes freaking out. And he says, "Oh, we're through. They said I'm an egomaniac. I don't even know what that means." And I don't know when we're going to use it, but at some point we will.
Chew it up,
Yeah.
man. Pretty much a lot.
Right?
That's why we got. That's why we got
what that
Rich.
means.
We'll
That's
throw it in
Tweeting now.
yeah, right.
What I was going to say about dynasty depression is it's a good point to bring up, in that new listeners that will undoubtedly probably gain from having you on the show probably will have that first reaction about dynasty depression, because it's a term that kind of we coined and I coined in one of my early DLF articles. It's less about kind of an overall down feeling because you have a shitty roster or you're rebuilding or whatever it may be, and more kind of this underlying mechanism that resembles real life depression, but it really comes out in kind of underlying biases that we develop over time due to experiences that we have. If we have a Dalvin Cook this past year that gets hurt right before the fantasy playoffs or during the fantasy playoffs, whenever he hurts his shoulder, re-injures it, we may then be less likely to draft him the next year, or we may be like, oh, he's always injured, which he may be, but we take this one experience that's very personal to us and exaggerate it to that overall concept of that player. So that's kind of what we're talking about with dynasty depression, and we'll see if that comes out for you at all. But we're really trying to apply this overall to the psychology of rankings as well. And so since you do rankings alongside me at DLF, we'll kind of dig into that process. And before we do that, I just want to kind of stop us there and again just welcome you to the podcast. We're here to help you learn hopefully more about yourself, for better or worse. So in Peter, in Dynasty, what would you say is the thing you need help most with?
Yeah, I can already tell in your voice. Oh God, this guy is not gonna go well. He is an honest actor.
It's one of those
Let's
troubling
just get
clients.
through this. No, it's entirely true. I'm anti self-reflection. I'm very much rhetoric based. I will take an argument just because I think it will get me out of that argument. Well, like I'm gonna bend stuff. Now I do also try and show how you can do that and how you can not do that, because having been just a guy trying started. Like I'm from England. Like I didn't even know if American football existed for most of my life. That's mostly a joke. But like I said, I wasn't interested in it, so I learned late quickly, and it gave me some sort of, I believe, empathy to those just trying to pick it up. They're trying to engage in the sport in a new way, make some friends, have some fun, or they've just been playing casually and now they want to get more serious. And I know there are a few things that mislead you fairly easily. Like, a lot of narratives where the author of it assumes you have some kind of base knowledge, or the caveats, the asterisks is around this stuff, and you don't, because you're just trying to get someone to give you ranks, give you an exact idea. And so what gives me dynasty depression mostly, where I would say, especially now where I've written a few things and I've made a few tweets, and occasionally I can see people trying to use it their own way. And I'm like, I hope they got the base assumptions in when I said or posted that. Did I do a good enough job of that? Like people are trying to argue for never Tyler Higbee. That's a take I would say I have right now. And I have a lot of fun with takes on Twitter, not in articles. I try and be a little more fair balanced in articles, but on Twitter, I'd just be like, yeah, who? I don't know who that guy is. No one should care who that guy is. And then when I see someone like using something that I use to form my own opinions, and I think they might have got it from me, I'm like, I hope they're doing the same thing. I hope they took the how we can't know into account before they form their opinion, if you know what I mean. Like, I really don't think Tyler Higbee's going to happen, but it's not like I think it's a 0 chance. Like, and that's the standing on the hill looking for the sweet sour. Whatever happens in 2020, like, it's going to be really sweet or really sour, and that's the fun. So I guess that's the depression that comes across to me when I see someone that I think I might have helped or hurt, and I just hope they understood everything I said and not just a sweet nugget that gave them an opinion. Like, that part would depress me. Like, Breakout Age is another good one. Like, I'm a big fan of Breakout Age, but to be really clear, I don't use it in models, and it's not the only thing I look at. But you can't provide all of that context every time you give a take. So you put a chart that gives hit rates, and everyone's like, oh, that's it. Yeah, but, you've got a brain, and certainly my chart isn't better than your brain. So you're like, okay, that's the general pattern, but I can still like Michael Pittman. Screw you. And that's the exact attitude you kind of need in fantasy football. It gives me an idea. All right. But you should still go with everything else that you know as well at the same time. And so I don't know if that's a very clear answer. You might notice I'm already not giving exact answers here, but that's not a matter of dynasty depression. I guess the other one that comes to mind, just off the top of my head, is when I don't not like a player, but I also don't really like a player, and you end up with none of him. Like, a good example recently is AJ Brown. I liked him. Like, he was in my top receivers. I thought he definitely had a decent potential. And I'm not scared off by teams and trying to read situations so much, because we do that terribly every single time. Like, that's one of the main things that we can count on, that we are going to be wrong. Is the most consistent of all time. So that didn't scare me. But he was also, like, being drafted in a spot where I liked getting value, I thought it was, in JJ Arcega-Whiteside a lot later than AJ Brown. But I didn't trade up to get AJ Brown because I was happy to get Whiteside later. And that means I got a lot of crappy AJ Arcega-Whiteside shares and no AJ Brown shares. And the reverse of that is I never overpaid for JJ Arcega-Whiteside. So I didn't hurt my team, but I also didn't help my team because I didn't reach on him. So I liked AJ Brown fine, but I didn't like him a lot. And I guess that's still the disappointing, depressing thing about Dynasty. You can be right, but you miss where to go all in on something. And it's not that you didn't get it or you didn't like them, but they didn't fall to you, so you don't get that little bit of luck to go along with it. And I think, especially me, most people that start to engage in fantasy statistics a lot more, that's the hope. It's like, I want to know when to go all in on Eckler and all in on AJ Brown. And the truth is, it can tell you who are more or less likely to be the better or worse players. But there's never anything clear cut that says, go get AJ Brown no matter what. I mean, people will say that. And I normally spend my time arguing with them about understanding, the odds, literally, like I was saying before. But you do sometimes have to make those calls. And because I like the sweet, sour fall, it's sometimes hard to be on the sour side when you really weren't down on a player. Like, I had a lot of Austin Eckler. That was a positive example. He didn't have to get that luck. You could take him around earlier in rookie drafts and for nothing, like a third round pick, who cares? So he was easy to get. And that's why I also end up liking lower drafted and undrafted guys, because it's just easier to make those bets. But knowing when to, I don't know what rating or podcast is, but knowing when to go all in, I was going to say something else. At a high value.
We'll fix it in post.
Missing on that. I mean, that's the winners right there. When you go all in on the right player in the early rounds, I mean, you're also trying to hit those late picks, but they're available to everyone. But knowing when to go all in on high value players, that's the trick. And that's something he found a lot to help. Sometimes there's an inefficiency in the market, and that's wonderful because you can take advantage of that. Like, I don't like him because of what he did last year. Okay, I like this. This is going. Let's continue thinking that Odell Beckham can't play football anymore. Juju is definitely bad at football now, guys. Don't worry about it. I got you. So yeah, inefficiencies are good, but then also you end up with a lot of Antonio Brown and wasted value on your teams. Just throw that out too.
Don't worry, we have Corey
I'm just
Davis
waiting
too.
for. I'm just assuming one of you will mention when I've answered the question. So,
well, the thing about this, the discussion is the question, and the situation is the discussion, right? So we don't necessarily want to delve into that one perfect answer, but you said a lot of really good stuff about how one of the things that depress or that can cause some depression in you is that you're trying to do good for the fantasy football world, and you worry that sometimes that point didn't come across. And that is a very clear-cut example of what we're talking about right here. Sometimes it's not a matter of whether you were right or wrong. It was, did you really get your point across perfectly? And these things can come across in multiple manners, even though you may not influence your personal rankings on players like that, like, which is what Jeremy will ask about here in a second. But you want to make sure that that person out there on Twitter that followed your information is applying it in the correct manner so that he can do good as well.
This might be a therapeutic moment for Jeremy. Do you feel like you're talking right to Twitter right now after all the criticism you give people for unfairly biasing the market? Now you see there's some remorse in a tweeter.
Right.
You never see remorse in a tweeter. I've never had someone come back and be like,
"Come on, just work with me on this."
You're absolutely correct. It just doesn't happen. That's the fun. You kind of have to engage.
Not a therapist.
Especially in Twitter and especially in fantasy football. And that's why I honestly enjoy it. You have to engage with it in a certain way. And now everyone can engage with it however they want and have fun the way you want to have fun. Like, obviously, no one can tell you what's fun and what's not. But I have found a lot of joy in this community. And, like, I think my motivations are a little different than most people that, get applied the word, hey, the great. Like, I'm just a guy. Like, I haven't outbeaten someone's win percentage. I didn't create zero RB. I don't own yards.com, nothing like that, just a guy. But I get a lot of value from the community. I have a small social circle after moving country at a later age, and I found friends and a community and something to enjoy and a way to engage in sport now that I have to have a job and life a little bit, and I can't spend all my time either running or playing sports or joining leagues. I can't do that anymore, and this is a way to engage with sport on some level. And I get a lot of stuff that's, I guess, ethereal and certainly not monetary based from the community, right? And that's honestly why I started doing stuff, because it was an attempt to give back. And I know everyone wants to become Matthew Berry, and there's kind of a catch-22 here, because you can't help unless anyone thinks they should listen, and you can't get that unless you mimic some of those things, like success, like hits, like popularity, whatever it is. So you can end up trying to mimic a lot of stuff, like doing promos, but hopefully... But I found it like a protection around myself from people not coming back and apologizing or people never realizing it's I don't know, it's like a comfy coat, because the honest truth is, it's like, that's fine. You can not use it. You can not me on Twitter all day. I don't even have particularly thick skin, but I've never been upset on Twitter. So I'm engaging it in this way where, like, I'm just here to, like, I'm getting a lot out of this. If you're not getting anything out of me, it's okay. Like, it's good. And if what you're getting out is like making fun of what I think, I'm good with that too. Like, it's cool. I enjoy the discussion. I enjoy the trolling. There are some like top-notch trolls that know how to walk the line of just being hilarious, but also frustrating and really triggering you. And I honestly appreciate as a form of rhetoric, it's pretty impressive. And then there are some people who are honestly just out to see the world burn, which is mostly me. And awesome, honest to God, nasty people. That's true everywhere. But like, I think if you engage with it the right way, especially on Twitter, like whether you want to make content or not, like if you're there realizing some people want to debate or argue different ways, some are just looking to get a rise out of you. And for me, as someone trying to create content, I just have to be comfortable with it. That's what I mean by it. Like, it's okay that you're just there just to say the opposite every single time. I can kind of appreciate that. And you can do it and know you're not ruining someone's life if you enjoy that kind of interaction with people, because you can seriously hurt some people with social media and social bullying. Like, some people have seriously psychologists here get problems, but like I can understand that, but I'm not engaging honestly with you. Like, if you're talking to me that way, I'm like, okay, cool, that's a fun conversation too. I guess I've gotten a little off point here, but I do kind of enjoy that we can engage those different ways, if you know what I mean. You can have just an argument that's about, I hate you and you hate me, but in real life we realized both of us would shake hands and pick each other up if we fell down, because we're just decent human beings. But right here, right now, we're going to pretend we're not, because it's fun to argue. I get that. Or the difficulty is when someone is into that and you start that way and they're like, hey, man, that's just offensive. And like, oh, crap. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean it.
I thought we were going
in a different
angle.
kind of conversation. I've had to drop into many DMs saying, look, I didn't actually, like, I hope I didn't upset you or affect your day in any way. It's Twitter. Why would I? But just in case, it's okay. I didn't mean it. I just thought we were doing a thing. And that's the reverse of it. But I think that goes to Twitter takes like you were just talking about before. Like, as long as you're engaging in a way that's just trying to add value. If I don't, I don't. But if I do, that's what I'm aiming for. And anyone that does or doesn't come back or gets angry about it, I hope that's what they're here for. Like, I just want to be angry about it because in regular life, everyone has to be a normal, decent human being. Sometimes you just want to be angry at people because they don't think the right thing, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just cutting this off because I have no way of rounding this
No,
out.
You're good. You're good. So, no, as a therapist, my reaction is that perspective is great because we say sometimes, you know, when we're always picking apart everything that someone says, and then sometimes we just say, you know, sometimes feelings are just meant to be felt. You know, so sometimes it's just okay to be angry, and it's not seen as maladaptive.
Right,
like,
it is.
Humans are meant to be angry too. Like, it's not just this. Everyone has to be happy. And you know, I saw a tweet of yours like a week ago or something that was like, you know, I wake up and you know, I don't want to go to work, but then I realize that today I don't have to work or something like that. And you're like, that seems sad, but also I'm happy about it. And so it's this conflict, but
right.
that's like real and transparent and cool to see. And like, you know, everything you said about Twitter, where it's, you know, there's a role to play sometimes, and yet we're all kind of genuine people, hopefully.
I do,
you know, that, yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry, man. You meant to talk more than me, but I was thinking about this earlier today because there's a hypocrisy to it, which my life thing, as well as my Twitter and fantasy football thing, is I'm not going to lie. Like, I can be wrong a lot. I can get a lot wrong, not be true. But I'm going to think it's true if I say it's true. But at the same time, I love sarcasm and I love having fun on Twitter. So these two worlds collide sometimes. Like, literally yesterday, someone posted that JJ Arcega-Whiteside was a trash prospect and a trash NFL player, and they're not surprised, basically. And I engage with them honestly, which is hypocritical for a guy the next day who was like, Tyler Higbee who? Because essentially I'm doing the same tone. Like, I know the positives, but I'm just going to pretend they're all, you know, because I actually don't think the positives are that great. But he was doing the same thing, and I engaged with him honestly. Like, hey, let's slow down. There were some good things. Like, so back to back, they're a little hypocritical, or hypocritical is the word, actually. But I like I'm also doing it honestly. If someone engaged on that Tyler Higbee tweet with, hey man, there are some positives, I'd be like, yeah, I know. Like, I'm just, you know, it's fun to take.
That's
like,
not my shtick right now.
Right, yeah, I get that you didn't, because, you know, new people see your stuff every now and again. They're like, whoa, this guy's an asshole. And it's like, yeah, sorry. But like, if you listen to 5 minutes of any of me on a podcast, I was like, that guy doubts himself more than anyone else in the world. And that's the truth. That's the absolute truth. Like, I'm the first one to think that I'm wrong. But it's not always fun to exist in that space. You know, it's fun to have a vent now and again of JJ Arcega-Whiteside is trash, said this other guy, which is a perfectly fair just burst of feeling about a player. Not a player, but the statistical profile about a player. It's not about these actual individuals. It's important for me to keep those two separate. But it is a little hypocritical back to back to engage in someone honestly. He was just saying something, what's the word? They were making a statement.
Inflammatory, maybe.
Not even a statement. Declarative. It was a declarative statement. This player is trash. But like, he knew the positives, and I think I knew he knew the positives when he said it. But instead, I can like have an honest debate with him and be like, what? Do you not do your research? And he was like, of course I do my research. But you just said he was trash. Don't you know any of the positives? Yeah, here are the positives. Then what do you mean he's trash? And we're just having this argument where, but I hope, and he seemed to, because we got into a good conversation afterwards, know what we're doing, right? We're just practicing a little bit of an argument, you know? Mm-hmm. He doesn't like this player. I did. He was right. And yet I somehow get a small win out of it, I guess. And
think
people
that
today on that Tyler Higbee comment, they were like, whoa, 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 what about young tight ends? Look at all these good examples. I was like, yeah, whatever. And then I get to be the guy who has to admit he said something that's too strong. And I guess if there's dynasty depression, it is when people don't get that I'm neither of those things. Like sometimes it's fun to just say someone's not good, even though you know they could be.
Well, that dynasty depression, it kind of takes itself, or it takes a place in what you were saying earlier. You mentioned that you had JJ Arcega-Whiteside as somebody that you could kind of steal at a certain place in the drafts last year. You didn't have to reach for him and you could get him. But then at the end of the deal, now this year, he hasn't quite panned out. And you found yourself in a situation where you're going to argue with somebody, but you're doing it out of jest. But part of it deep down is that you still have that.
Yeah, right.
I really liked him.
You still feel like defending your take. And so there's a little hypocrisy there, too. It's like it could still happen, even though, I have also spent time proving how low his odds have come after that first year. It's like I do have to admit, like this looks like one I missed. That's fine. I'm gonna miss a lot. Like get ready. Right. Like we're lucky to get 50% over a 10-year span, let alone a single year.
Well, and this is a good time to kind of ask about rankings then, because with the luxury of rankings is we can switch those whenever we want. I mean, we still have the historically kind of timestamp pre-draft ones, but you can change your rankings right now if you want to drop JJ Arcega-Whiteside down a little bit. But do you see when you're significantly different than consensus or other rankers, do you see that as kind of your individuality, Peter, or is that a glaring like, oh, I'm biased against or toward this player?
Well, it depends. I think we all have to be biased at a certain point, and this is I don't know if it's complex or another hypocrisy in me. But like, I want to know how much I can know and how much of that, how much of what. Like points per game is the most predictive stat, points per game the following season. Just stat to stat, what predicts how many points are going to score next year. Points per game is essentially better, but hardly anyone talks about points per game because we're trying to beat it. We're trying to combine stats, you're trying to use expected points, you're trying to use air yards, trying to read a situation. But at a certain point, you have to accept like the strongest stat cannot get you really over that 55% mark in terms of how much of the variance it can explain. And, R squared itself has, all these problems, and it's not a prediction stat, and statistics is actually complicated, and I don't know most of it. But I can know roughly what's the best thing to base an opinion on, and then I build an opinion on top of it. So, like, you can find trends with age. That's what the guy with Tyler Higbee is doing now. And I didn't do it, but it's really easy to pull an argument apart if it's based on what a player did at this age compared to other players at that age. Because age in no way contributes to their ability or their situation. And so it's always going to fall apart. There are things that have some side of insight into things that we can't necessarily... There isn't a calculation. Our brains and little models playing fantasy football aren't good enough to break apart reality and predict it. Nostradamus can't do it. We can't do it. It's that simple. But there are things that are harder to pull apart because they seem to give us some, I guess the industry term, a signal for what is actually true. And points per game is one of those. So if you base an opinion based on points per game or opportunity earned, it's a lot harder to pull it apart because it's on a foundation level. Now, like I said, that's still, you're lucky to get a 55, 60% R squared or however you want to judge it, which means at best saying you've got a 40% shot of being wrong about this thing based on good foundations. So imagine how terrible takes that aren't based on good foundations are. So what I'm rounding this out to say is I do think some opinions are just jack. Some you can tear them apart and not in jest, and not just to have fun on Twitter. It's like, you shouldn't be telling people this because it's built on bad foundation, if you like. It's like, I get your narrative. We have to build a narrative and an opinion on top of what we actually know because we don't know. We know so little of what's going to happen. The NFL is always different. Situations are always wrong. Who would guess the best wide receiver from last year's class went to the worst offense with the lowest volume passing offense that was going to switch quarterback halfway through the season and still remain run-focused, and the guy was going to have one of the most efficient seasons literally the NFL has ever seen. Like anyone projecting that should not be sharing opinions with the fantasy football community, because that is not an opinion based on anything that's structurally or foundationally true. It was based on if, and a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter, but they would have been right? And that's the conflict.
Five-way parlay.
And so my basic, I'm trying to get a good foundation, build a decent opinion on top, and then find these few situations where I can go stand on a hill and say, I'm going to get it wrong. Right. Either way, it's going to be sweet or sour, and I'm just going to enjoy the fall one way or the other. But I know and so to get back some way to rankings, and this is essentially what I'm trying to do with rankings. It's not that I'm not necessarily trying to stand on a hill with anything I'm presenting as content. That's why my articles are different than my Twitter stream, which is much more a draft board for random thoughts and jokes. And in an article, or even podcasts are a little intermediate area between the two, but in an article, I'm trying to stretch it all out. I'm trying to cleanly show what we can know, what we can't know, what we can know of what. And I know that's a confusing sentence, but not every stat tells you about every other stat the next season. Volume can tell you about likelihood of getting more volume. Efficiency can tell you who's likely more volume combined with draft capital than less. But volume can tell you that it's more likely to get similar. And so not everything tells you about everything the next season. And so it's important to understand the difference. And there's not a lot that actually works. So it's not like you have to memorize and or be a statistical genius. Like, I'm a jamoke. I'm not that smart. But you can just know a few rough things and then build your opinions on it. And because I'm not Evan Silva or Josh Hernsmeyer or some super genius, I'm going to get about as much wrong as everyone else, but at least I know I can defend it in an argument. And that's what my rankings are. I'm trying to convert those articles into something that someone else can look at. I don't work on my rankings a lot because, one, the format for DLF is really weird. Like, I have to do it all manually, and it's a lot. Rankings are really hard. Also, it's just hard to rank players between positions in a certain format. So mostly what I've broken rankings down to is trying to come up with those basic foundation, things that I can defend in an argument, not much of my opinion. And then I've created a way of structuring my ranks, which is like the bottom. I only do 150. I rank 150 players because that's how many players you rank in Superflex rankings. In DLF, it's just less than if you're doing regular PPR rankings. But the bottom 10 are just players I think you should know that you get later in the draft. And the reason I can do that is because everyone else is ranking properly. But I can be like, hey, Zach Pascal, 150. Not because I would take him there, just because I'm trying to highlight players. And in my notes next to it, I'll be like, you don't take him here. I'm just saying this is a name I want you to know like 10 rounds after this. And at the very start, I try and structure it in a way that I think about drafting, which is probably, I've probably talked too long again. But I try and...
Never.
It depends on the draft, but I do have a rough idea of I'm trying to focus on one thing and I'll let something else go. So I have an ultimate strength and then I know where my weakness is. I don't know if that's a good strategy at all, but I have an idea it is, and I could probably defend it in an argument. But like if it's Superflex, everyone's going to be hyper-focused on quarterback value, but the ADP doesn't reflect that. And so every tier that I have starts with quarterbacks. And so even if I would value a running back over a quarterback, I have a positional tiering within each tier. And so that probably doesn't make sense in words. But yeah,
no, that's a psychological aspect applied to it, right? You know that in Superflex, a quarterback might carry more value, even though you don't necessarily want to take a quarterback at that level. You're saying that a running back would be in that same tier, but you're going to put the quarterback on top just because of what you feel like the group would do.
Well, they have more value immediately after the draft. Like if you go look at ADP for any draft or all drafts in DLF and consider trade for a quarterback taken in the 10th round for a running back taken in the 5th round or the 6th round, it's going to be really easy to do that compared to how far they fell compared to the running back. Reversely, if you try and trade that running back up for a quarterback, they're going to say no because I don't want to go down a quarterback. I need 2 quarterbacks. And so immediately after the draft, and it doesn't seem to be part of drafting logic right now, quarterbacks jump up in value even if their ADP is stable. Because no one wants to go down to one quarterback in a Superflex or a start 2. And that's the simple reasoning where I always put quarterbacks at the top. And I kind of got positional rankings running through different tiered rankings, if you know what I mean. But even that's unfair because rankings are just meant to be a straight up how would you draft. But my brain doesn't work that way. I can't give you who I will definitely take 12th of 11th. And so I've tried to be a little more creative with my ranks. I don't know if it helps anyone, but there you go.
Yeah. Well, and it depends on, the format and how the draft's playing out potentially, depending on how you want to adjust kind of your board and stuff. But for instance, in a format like SFB, you have to come up with either completely different ranks or adjust it to the format. So how do you take your rankings in and, reorganize them, or do you have an idea of your ranks kind of in the back of your head since you don't change them very much?
Don't have a running list in my head. I've tried to create like a model to help me create base ranks, and then I could go in and edit as things change. But I have completely failed at that because there's a lot I want to take into account. The best I've come up with is like player profiler has a lifetime value, and I want to come up with something like that because it's across positions and it takes into account the future as well as the likely current coming up scoring, if you know what I mean. It's a really interesting number to try and create. But I haven't managed to do it. My rankings are something where I update my ranks at least twice a month, even when nothing's happened. Because you can always find something you can tweak, frankly. And you just go into the system on DLF and I take a look and I'm like, nah, I don't like that idea. I'm going to move this player over here. It's much more casual than an exacting process. Because rankings, I really don't think you should. I think you should approach drafts with ADP. Much more than rankings. Like, it's important to have an idea of players you want to go high on, so you can highlight players with your rankings or other people's rankings. But like the most important thing to know is if I like Darius Guice, when do I have to take him? And rankings don't get you that. Like, I'm a big fan of the Jacob Rickroth school of playing fantasy, which is I love older players. They follow the value, especially at wide receiver. They continue to be productive, but like, I don't draft Julian Edelman over AJ Brown because of that. And so to do rankings would be insincere that way. So it's a weird mix when you get to rankings. And so that's why I try and keep to the foundational stuff. Look, Julio Jones is worth less than a lot of younger players right now. Julio Jones, I won't guarantee you one. I want Julio Jones over most of the players that are going to be ranked above him at wide receiver because I get him lower. He's much more likely to produce at that level this coming year and the next coming year. And I think age, especially at the wide receiver position, is overvalued. So rankings versus drafting is very different. So what you want to know is, when do I have to take Julio Jones? Someone else doesn't get him, or Darius Guice, or Philip Lindsay, or whoever you actually want to be high on because someone that's smarter than me said, make sure you get this guy. So that's what you need to know. And that was a difficulty for me in what I concentrated on Scott Fishbowl. Speaking of that, like and we know our opinions of players. Sometimes we're like, oh, I guess, but mostly, especially live, it's easy to forget a player on my fantasy league because they rank them weirdly and a player can be ranked really low. So that's a good reason to have rankings available. But mostly I wanted to know, like, when do I have to take Odell Beckham, for example? Because I kind of want Odell Beckham on my team. I know I like him more than most people. I would take him round 1. Let's go. But they would be stupid to take him round 1 because I don't have to. And ADP can't give you all of that. Often it's wrong and you get quote unquote sniped. But that's what you need to know in a draft. Not so much other people's rankings or even your rankings. Go into it with a sense, knowledge of best ways to build teams. But what you need to know is ADP, or a better idea of ADP. And ADP is perfect, so maybe you know a better thing that gives you that. But yeah, rankings, I think ADP is much more important than in rankings in a draft.
Jeremy, do you have any follow-up on top of that before we roll into the hot cushion?
I do. So,
guys, you really don't want to go freeform on me. You've got to be like, I'm going to give him 2 minutes and I'm going to talk over him. That's because I just keep talking about this stuff.
I've expressed my opinions on ADP on here quite a few times, and I wrote a DLF article probably a month or two ago now called "The Psychology of Value," where I kind of attack the concept of value as it is, because it's basically a consolidated form of individual opinions that become group opinions that become drafts, and then that's everyone's value, and that seems solidified in some way or true in some way, which is a fallacy. But you know, I do
I don't
agree
know.
that
Can I ask
yeah,
you what you
absolutely.
mean by that?
Absolutely.
Because the one thing I do know, and I have to accept, because I went in assuming the opposite. I'll be completely honest. I didn't believe in any of you fuckers. Pardon me, I forgot the rating on this show, but I don't believe in any of you guys or girls. I don't believe in any of you. I'm just going to leave it there. And so I really didn't think ADP would be very good. But even like DLF ADP, and the reason I say even ADP is an amazing thing. They do it every month.
Yeah.
They've got a history going back to 2000, which isn't long enough, but it's going back to 2013. It's manually done. Ryan just does it. And it's an amazing project for something that's easily overlooked as a single number that doesn't matter. Something happened.
This is Jeremy's evolution of value.
But what I was going to say is the consensus is actually pretty accurate. This is something, even if we go to something less manual, like who was it? It was Tanho over at DLF. He took the consensus rankings or consensus ADP, one or the other, and from fantasypros.com, which is a public, everyone can see them all the time, download them whenever you want for free. And he found them to be as good at predicting, just using like wide receiver 12 scores as this points per game. And so that was his projection. This is the consensus wide receiver 12. He will get the average points per game wide receiver 12. He found them as good as my projections, or to do a better name, Mike Clay's projections. He found them just as efficient or good at telling you who's going to score what, just using consensus ADP. And that's something that's been followed up with DLF ADP, which is a lot smaller system, like I just explained, but like we get most positions and most production tiers about 50% right. And if you're like 50% sucks, yeah, but it's also like the best you could possibly hope for. Like like doing slightly better than guessing is what we put all this work into doing, and that's the consensus. Now, and so that's why I was kind of interested in what you said there. Like,
no, absolutely, and
you
I
said it was a fallacy, and I believe that. When I look at it, it's like as a group, you're fairly good, and it's annoying. So if you could beat that, that'd be great.
It is, and I use it, and everyone should use it. So and I'm so glad that you interjected like that, because on Twitter it's so hard to have this conversation because the tweet back is, you know, oh, so does that mean you take, you know, Keyshawn Vaughn over Saquon Barkley because you don't believe in value? And it's like, no, like you're missing the whole point. It's that you take ADP, which is probably our best predictor, or value, which is, you know, on a trade calculator or something like that, which is an attempt to quantify that player's value and maybe some future value as well. And you take that as fact. And then when somebody makes a trade that has, you know, is 10 ADP slots behind what, you know, they should have done, like you're trading you know, a guy that's ranked 15 spots in ADP behind, and then you say that guy's an idiot, he's wrong for doing that, and you say, well, okay, in 2 months that might flip, and then he's not wrong. And the point isn't to say that, you know, so we don't know, so we don't use anything. It's to get away from this black and white, this right and wrong decision making, and saying we're just trying to do our best to predict, and everyone is going to be individual in terms of how they use that and how much they weight that and how they utilize that with ADP, with their rankings.
I like that. I'm going to go a little further and say the only way you make a good move, and especially in Dynasty, is by making a bad move.
Right.
Yep. Because then
like I give you an example which is going to completely blow up my potential of succeeding at this, because the default way is what I said. That's what I want to do. I want Odell Beckham. I don't want to have to take him earlier than I have. That way I give up no value, and my risk reward is accounted for by his lower ADP, right?
Right.
And Juju falls, and you know, it's an inefficiency in the market, so I can take advantage of it. They're really rare and they're really hard to get because your draft spot is in the right place, or you forget, or someone else is a little bit higher or sees you coming. So majoritively, in my limited experience, my vast experience of playing way too much Dynasty football, is if you want to make the right move, the move that says, well, the move everyone should have made, you're going to have to make a move that at the time everyone says, you shouldn't do that. Like, that's a terrible move. And to give you an example, like, I want some Cortland Sutton right now. Like I'm big on the Suttons. Just to shout out FF Man Bun. Like I really like the season he had last year. I find it really big in efficiency that we're really high on AJ Brown and DJ Moore, and Cortland Sutton's just gonna There's literally nothing that Sutton hasn't done to this point that isn't as or more impressive than both of those players. Like I don't think that's entered the consciousness of the community right now. And I get the problems with him. Like I didn't think DJ Moore was a better prospect. Love DJ Moore. I think his ADP is fine. AJ Brown, I was fine on him, but I definitely wasn't going out my way to reach for him. I'm really worried about the over efficiency and a low passing volume offense. He's probably being drafted at what I think is his ceiling, like max. Cortland Sutton, on the other hand, is one of those players that's kind of in that range, but drafts are done, so I want him. But the only trade I've really been able to work out where someone was willing to trade him for was Keenan Allen and Marcus Brown, a player I both think are inefficient in the market right now. I like him more than ADP. I think Keenan Allen is easily Cortland Sutton's maximum upside. And if that triggers you, go look at the number of players who've had 3 12 seasons at the wide receiver position, then go worship at the altar of Keenan Allen, you draft worshipping schmuck. He's an amazing player. Like, that is the ultimate upside of any wide receiver you can get. 3 top 12 seasons. Good luck finding it again. So I think Cortland Sutton can hit that. But if I trade a Keenan, especially as someone who values wide receivers, Keenan Allen's going to keep producing values older wide receivers. Like, that's me giving up everything I hope to get. Plus Marcus Brown, who I think people, again, I really like the player. I don't see a Keenan Allen in his future. I don't see like a Cortland Sutton in Marcus Brown's future, but I think he's going to be good in the NFL. He's going to be consistently good. He's going to be better than where he's valued right now. And I think he's young. So like, I love the value I got on him. But to give them both up means if I'm wrong, I just suck the value out of my team.
Well,
like, it's going to take a while to recover from that kind of value loss. I could go take both of those players and get a running back, which does a lot more for wins. Getting Cortland Sutton's much more about extending my value and still having great wide receiver production, and also getting to stand on their hill, to be fair, which is what I play for. So,
it's fun being right.
That reminds me of what you're saying, not just because it's going through my head right now, because it's really recent. Like, this is the last couple of days I've been trying to get Cortland Sutton. So that, to me, if someone brought it to me, I would say, just keep Keenan Allen and Marcus Brown. They're great players at great value. Giving them both up, like you're giving yourself the entire floor, and you're giving them all you're giving them the floor, and there's a little upside there too. And you're giving all your floor up for all your ceiling. It would take you 2 years to recover from that amount of value loss if your team isn't great next year. That's what I would say. I love those players. Don't trade them. But I want Cortland Sutton. And if I want Cortland Sutton, I have to make a bad move right now because no one's giving him up for his ADP.
Right.
And that reminds me exactly what you're saying right now. Like, I accept the ADP. I'm not giving Keenan Allen up for that. But if I want Cortland Sutton, I have to.
You got to do.
Have to.
So what do you do? And that's I think that's what you're talking about in like a real life situation. Like,
absolutely.
Well, let's discuss that a little bit more.
Great move, maybe.
In the meantime, I'm going to scoot on down to the other end of the couch. So, Peter, you can take my place on the hot cushion. Today, I'm going to discuss your fantasy football
footprint. On the hot cushion? Wow.
And follow that up with some questions. So please keep in mind that I'm going to be very direct, to the point, and brutally honest. And the questions are not necessarily going to be easy. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Well, before we get into the meat of this potato, I'd like to ask just a few things about you. So first introduction question. How long do you take to make a draft pick when you have one of two players that you love at the same position on the board at the same time, and you're dead set for both of them? How long do you sweat over that decision?
Like, just same position, I can't decide between Juju and Odell Beckham, for example?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So let's say you hit this thing.
Pretty much instantaneously.
Like, you're not one of those people who sweats over it. Like, because that's the question, right? Like, if you got these two guys and it's your 1A and your 1B, and they're both there for you and you didn't expect it, is it you take your full 8-hour shot clock, or is it one that you just know and you pick?
Not in that situation. I know this is meant to be fast, but like you're essentially describing I think they're both good players. I can't separate them out, and therefore I just like whichever one feels better, take over. Like I've got nothing. That's what that situation is. I don't know how. I like them both. So whichever one I click on, I'm like, you kind of. It's like that. It's like Solomon's choice. Right? Like when you're put on this clock, it's like, okay, I'll take a Juju. Well, maybe, and if you have a maybe, then just take the other guy. If it's a positional switch, and I don't know if to switch over to running back, like that takes me a little. That might sweat out. It's like, well, I get a good running back come the next round or whatever. That can make me sweat. But if it's the same, if it's two players I value equally, and it's not some sort of league setting or that, yeah, it's pretty much. You kind of know where your bias sits, so I just take that one.
Okay, well that's pretty cool.
And it's Odell Beckham, by the way, between the two. I love Juju, but I feel so much better taking Odell. I don't think that's right, but it's how it feels.
Well, that's intriguing.
Many people would tell you wrong. Many people would say that you're wrong, but some people would say that you're right, and we just talked about why that doesn't matter.
Right. So, just quick little thing before we roll into intro question 2. But yeah, man, I was doing a redraft league one time, and it was very intriguing to me. It's something we'll talk about in future writings. But we basically used song cues to allow you to draft for as long as your song cue was on. And I found that by the end of several rounds, people would take every second on their song clock, regardless of whether their song was 3 minutes long or 4 minutes long or 2 minutes long. Like everybody took the full time. And I was just one of the only ones that was like, I already know my guy. I'm just going to walk up here and take my guy. Like I'll listen to my song for 30 seconds because I like it. But why would I wait? I got my guy. Even if it's 2, I'm going to pick it. I'm going to go.
Yeah, I think I speed up as the draft goes along. I feel the same way because it's like I know my guys down here late. I get this guy, the argument for everyone, but like that's my one, Right. And we're all taking shots. That's when I fail.
So, intro question 2: whereabouts you live in this world?
Kentucky.
All right, not our first guest from Kentucky, because I actually saw that you ran into John Bosch the other day, probably intentionally, I think.
I live about Lexington. I realized that it sounded so generic. I was trying to be mysterious or something. No, but like, I give you my house.
I would not have pegged that as a Kentucky accent. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, this is what we all sound like down here. It's pretty low key. Not many people know it, but this is it. I've got at least 5 people confused right now.
So obviously, you've been playing fantasy football a long time. Has the success of any one player ever caused you to doubt your player modeling spreadsheets?
Yeah, I mean, if you're not constantly looking at what you got wrong to try and get a little bit better. But again, I think it's very clear I don't play from a spreadsheet. Like I form opinions and then kind of go into the draft with what I know and what I don't know, and I go for it because I'm not like a super genius computer guy. like some of these guys that are commenting, I'm just trying to do that for the foundation. But let's see. Terry McLaurin, he doesn't pause. Everyone said if Terry McLaurin hits, that'll mean everyone has to reconsider. The truth is, guys, look, one player doing something you don't expect should never change. Like your process was wrong. Your model was crap. Your stat that you were using should never have been used, and you should have known that long before. If one player can switch the balance on something that you're meant to take at least a 5 to 7 to 10 year average on, then you shouldn't be doing it, frankly. But so no, it's just, but I do want to know if there's anything on Terry McLaurin's profile that I missed. Harold Ruggs, someone Ruggs this year. The sheer
Herman
love
Ruggs, I think.
from people, Herman, that's it, that watch him made me doubt him before he's done anything. Because as much as I like taking and have a strong opinion, because no one wants to hear his variance and maybe you should do this advice. And then they want to be mad at you if you get it wrong, and that's fine. Like I'm the same way. That's why I listen to content. That's why Matthew Kelly's really popular and really good, because he gets on and gives you a firm opinion, and then he gets to be mad if he's wrong, and he's good with that because he's strong as hell in his own opinion. He knows why. And no one wants to hear the couching of, well, maybe AJ Brown, but I wouldn't take him there, because then you get the mistake I made them last year. You got to have an opinion. Yeah, Terry McLaurin, I do want to look. And Harold, whatever his name is, Ruggs, like
Herman,
I do listen. And the people that I respect were mostly like, nothing extra special there. I don't know where it's coming from on film. And I was like, that's curious as hell. You know what I mean? when you're listening to this guy looks great, he's a superstar. Like literally, they're seeing a superstar, and these aren't people that are not paying attention, not watching. I mean, they're doing the homework. And then the few people that I know, like I really trust their process. I know them personally, so I can DM them. I'm like, "What's there?" And they're like, "It's good. It's good." It wasn't nearly as strong. So I was like, "What are they seeing?" And so I literally wrote a positive Henry Ruggs argument, and I know it doesn't take a lot of time, especially for articles. Like it digs into my family life. I'm gonna spend the time. And what I found is Terry McLaurin's touchdown upside on that offense was just phenomenal. It must have felt like Henry Ruggs was scoring a touchdown literally every other touch. He was an incredibly large part of that touchdown role for Alabama, right? Alabama. And what I came away with is, one, touchdowns aren't predictive, but it's not a bad thing to be really good at that, or that big of a part of an offense, right? Or that efficient. All those things are good. And that's not what I used which is why he didn't turn up. He turned up very low in my production models. But so it made me doubt it, because there's people that like him so much that like want to know why. Anytime your opinion is drastically different than anyone else, it makes me I doubt constantly. I think that's pretty clear just from hearing him speak. But like those are the moments where I need to go find out why, because I sure as hell don't know the future, and I'm not sure as hell not perfect, and I remember all my misses. And N'Keal Harry sucked last year, and that's as good as a promise as I can make with a production profile. So you kind of got to be humble, not on Twitter, obviously.
There you have to pretend that you were always right.
Right, but in making your own opinions or forming that foundational level of what I'm going to say is true to make an opinion about, I'm constantly doubting. And so people that especially when someone like Travis May he's going to want me to couch this, because no matter how I say it, he's going to be like, "No, I'm not," because he's like this. You can't catch him like that. But he is he likes Michael Pittman, I think, more than he thinks the consensus likes it. I think he would be fine with that. But I don't see much there. But that makes me doubt, so I go look more. And this answer was way too long. I could have just said that. Anytime there are a lot of opinions that are stronger than mine in the opposite direction, I doubt and go look for why. So every time, anytime, all the players.
Well, that's still a good answer, and I've only got 2 more intro questions before we get into the hard-hitting analysis. I am a beer guy, but I also appreciate meads and ciders. So I have to ask you, what is your favorite cider?
I don't know. I have a favorite, so I'm just going to say Strongbow, because that's the only brand name I know.
All right, well, that works. That's an easy answer. So the final intro question, what is your favorite thing about Australian fantasy football?
Australian fantasy football? That it's in Australia.
I like the captain earns double points. You know, it's kind of like rugby, so it's a little bit weird. I also like it when people get fish hooked. It's fun.
Right.
Now it is time for hard-hitting analysis and drama-laden questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Question number 1. Peter, you once lived in England before deciding to make the U.S. your new home. It appears as though this decision was made after graduation from college. I am an engineer by college degree, and in that program, we learned to make good assumptions. So I assume that you celebrated too heavily upon graduation, then, in a drunken booking of your return flight to the UK, made a reservation for the University of Kentucky instead of the United Kingdom. Embarrassed by your mistake, you have lived in Kentucky ever since. Who led the NFL in rushing yards in Week 7 of the 2004 NFL season?
2004? No idea.
Yes.
Adrian Peterson.
That would be Amon Green of the Green Bay Packers with 163 yards on only 15 carries against my Dallas Cowboys. Unfortunate. I just wasn't sure if you were a perfect stat memorization guy and could pick something out of almost 20 years ago.
Not at all, no.
The good thing is you're not supposed to get these right. So if you get them right, you win.
The spreadsheet nerd that he's been referring to is you, Kyle.
Right.
He and I are spirit animals, aka regular people, and that we have a process, and then we go in and act as people in drafts.
No, I'm a robot.
No, for real though, I have a terrible memory. I have to make notes. Every pocket I own has got a note that I no longer know what it's about, like milk. Did I need to get milk? Did someone want milk?
Or did I like that got milk ad?
I don't know, but I wrote it down. So yeah, my notes have gotten a little more detailed.
So the movie Memento is
basically me. Yeah, basically me. That's how I live my life. Yeah.
Awesome. Question number 2. Peter, you are a fan of metrics and other new terms that I am not sure of their exact meaning. Breakout age for me was about 13, but the pimples were mostly gone by 18. My physics for engineers professor was a college dominator who caused many students to switch majors to something easier like psychology. The Spark was guilty for causing many wasted hours of leisure due to games of Halo. In what year was the Atari game Breakout released?
So the Atari game Breakout. Honestly, no idea. 1974.
Ooh, that is really close. 1976.
Half point.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll give him a half point. I mean, he got in the right decade within a couple of years. I like it.
He had the Sega brand going too, so
right. And the Scott Fishbowl Sega shirt. Yep. All right, question number 3. I recently compared the DLF Dynasty rankings and noticed a few irregularities between everyone on today's podcast. Jeremy has Russell Wilson coming off the board in the late second round, while Peter, you have him as a top 10 startup pick. Mitch Trubisky is ranked outside of the top 32 at the position for Jeremy and as a QB2 for Peter. Jeremy didn't even bother ranking Kyle Allen, and that is just mean. Mean is an average set of numbers. Who is the running back 1 on my DLF rankings?
Saquon Barkley.
Oh, I don't rank at DLF. That's kind of
That's
awkward.
A trick question. Nice.
Oh, man, that's mean. But anyway, nope, so you're wrong. I don't have any rankings. So question number 4. Peter, you have a recognizable voice in the podcast industry and have been providing valuable commentary for years. Despite this success, you have never fared well in the Scott Fish Bowl. It is possible that if you ended up in a division with a better toy, like the kite, maybe you would soar to new heights. Excel is a powerful tool that you use to create projection spreadsheets. If you spent your 20s between the sheets and life limped along at subsonic speeds, what would you be?
No idea. No, I thought I'd come up with something there, but I don't have anything about sonic speed. It's got nothing.
You would be Lump. Because she's lump, she's lump, she's lump, she's in my head. This is a Presidents of the United States of America song, and I just read the lyrics from it. So,
yeah, I don't know. I'm too busy in spreadsheets, man. I don't listen to music.
All right. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate your candid and truthful answers and my insightful and hard-hitting analysis. Thank you for your time on my couch. Hopefully, your half point fares you well. You meet with a lot of standards there at the half point range.
I feel strong about it.
Yeah, very difficult to rise above 1.
I think there's like a 4-way tie for second with a half point.
No, we gave.
You're in good shape.
I'll take it.
We gave Leo a 0.01 on top of that. So yeah,
that's right. Leo Pasiga got a little bit higher. Yeah, that's right.
Well, that's awesome.
Tied for third. Still impressive. Still on the leaderboard.
Those are meant to be a little bit more difficult, but no, I appreciate that, and the discussions on the when we were talking about the rankings and the spreadsheets and the alterations was very interesting, and it's amazing how some of those players just don't quite fit a bill, and that's kind of why I was asking. I know how much you do that detail. Like, it's really intriguing to me when I run all my models and I run this Excel spreadsheets and I get everything set up. And then this dude comes out of nowhere and boom, top 15. And I'm like, how did I miss that? I didn't even think that was possible. I had the guy at 68th in the entire league, and now he's top 15. Like, how did I miss it?
Yeah, I've been looking at that recently, actually, in terms of repeats and where we draft players that enter. I wrote that one a year ago, like players that come from nowhere, essentially, to finish inside the top 5. And it's kind of what we all assume on rote, It happens at running back. Wide receivers, we get a lot more accurate. It's a lot less likely a wide receiver ends up in the top 5 that's drafted outside the top 36 in a running back, for example. So, yeah, there are still some interesting things. I keep forgetting his Twitter handle, but he posted about how he was saying that stock and bond and people in the stock market waving paper around, those type of strategies should be used in fantasy football increasingly right now, because instead of the market efficient, like we were talking about with ADP, and so instead of looking to beat an efficient market, what you look for is like the reverse. What does the market get wrong most often? It's like a subversive way of trying to find value. So like the best one I know of is mostly JJ Zacharyson, looking at breakout players on a year-to-year basis that outperform expectation most consistently, and he came up with several categories for different for different positions. I did a podcast on it recently and listed a bunch of others, but like one of them is like backup running backs. Players that we draft as backup running backs are very rarely the player that becomes the fantasy asset we want even if the starter gets injured. And so that's like a counterintuitive way of trying to find value. The market's efficient, but you go all subversive on it. And I think that's where most of the edge is right now. So, and that's why I started looking at ADP that way. Like, where does the unexpected come from? Rather than trying to predict who is the unexpected, where do they typically come from?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And that backup running back scenario is interesting, because I try not to draft guys that have kind of no standalone value at all. I think that there's a lot of kind of backup hype for guys like Madison and Tony Pollard and all those guys that would be assumed to take on the 3-down role if the 3-down guy in front of them goes down. But how often does that happen? I mean, it's happened with like James Conner, after Lev Bell sat out, he took the 3-down role, but for the most part, it's, they go committees or that. It does?
Almost every season, a guy ends up in the top 5 that was drafted outside the top 36 at the running back position. Pretty much every season. Since 2014, according to DLF ADP. One of the things that I like, and I've been going on for a while, and I didn't realize was in this vein until this new trend started, was I think undrafted free agents for one of the biggest edges. Like 24% of fantasy relevant seasons, and that's, the top 24 at wide receiver, top 24 at running back, top 12 at tight end or whatever, top 12 at quarterback. 24% of those seasons since, I can't remember where I took the date line, but it's very consistent. Say since 2010 have come from undrafted free agents. And I understand the problems and difficulties in identifying players with no draft capital are going to do it. But here's the thing. Because it's difficult, everyone just writes it off. They're undrafted free agents. I don't care. And there's a really big pool, but we can slim it down some with production metrics, say for rookies, or sophomores, or people who have done well in the league so far in this point in their career. And the value in it is no one's looking for it. It's like, it's hard to do, but it costs you your last round pick. It happens almost every year, 24% of relevant seasons, or 20% of relevant seasons, sorry. And it's a value to reward equation. At a certain point, the fact that it's unlikely doesn't matter. I mean,
sure.
One that I've been thinking about lately, actually, is that there's like 2 seasons out of the last 20 that a rookie wide receiver has not ended up in the top 24. Like, I'm big into numbers and wide receivers and predicting rookies, and I didn't know it was that severe. Like, every year, pretty much, there's going to be an AJ Brown. That I think that's missing from our general, because we all know not to expect anything from rookies, but one's probably going to do it. So
and I think
not drafting rookies makes a lot of sense, but if you can get whoever your flyer wide receiver is in the 15th round, you should probably draft on, just because you might catch fire in a bottle. And who else are you going to draft? Like a replacement wide receiver 4 that might start a couple games? I mean,
I think a lot of times when you have the wide receivers there and rookies, and what people tend to look at after the fact as opposed to during the situation is the looking glass that is the entirety of a season rather than the subsection that is the season. So if a rookie just takes a little longer to get a chance to see the field, we often look at his season as though it was a full season, and it's really not necessarily the case. Sometimes they don't get to see the field because there's blockage at the top of the depth chart. Somebody gets hurt, and all of a sudden they get their opportunity, so on and so forth. So, like you said earlier, points per game is really the true predictor, as opposed to something else along the lines of like, how did he finish last season overall on points, where that's where somebody like AJ Brown, he didn't really get a chance until later in the season. So he looked much better metrically than a lot of people, and that's why he's climbing up draft boards, and now he's unpurchasable because you have to get him so darn early.
Yeah, and I mean, I think somebody like Jalen Reagor is pretty well set up for that this year, but I think we don't want to fall into that trap of like what we did with AJ Brown, a low volume offense, a perceived bad situation, and that, I don't know, maybe a CD Lamb or something like that finds himself in. I mean, it's a good situation in terms of a high volume passing offense, but total wise.
Or a CD Lamb ends up in a situation where Amari Cooper gets hurt or something.
Yeah, but that's the exact thing. That's what I would avoid. Like I do a lot of player evaluation. It's my main thing with rookies. I put out, but I'm a big fan, especially if your goal, because my theoretical audience, if they exist, is trying to win all the time. They're not trying to stand on a hill or get whatever sweet sour mix. Like they're just trying to win more. And I think the best way to try to win more is to forget player evaluation. And structural drafting was Josh Herzmeyer, zero RB occasionally if you're in the right spot. It's forget what you think of the players and go where those things that happen most often are, even if you don't like the players. And that's what I was saying with a wide receiver. Like, I get that CD Lamb's probably not going to happen. Any reasonable person looking at the situation year one is like, that's tough. But like I said about AJ Brown, that's exactly what we would have said. So it's not predictive.
Right.
So instead of and nothing I can find, by the way, is predictive of a good situation. Like vacated targets is meant to be a big thing, and I just wrote a whole thing on it, and it's like it gets you less signal than draft capital. There is signal there, but no one's eked it out into something that's more usable than a way that I really know how to use it, put it that way. Apart from saying team intent. And I agree with that, but we could read that anyway. Like you were just saying about Jalen Reagor. So take all of the player evaluation out of it, and at a certain point, and that's the great thing about CD Lamb. No one's taken him in redraft because of that situation, but no one really wanted AJ Brown in his situation either. So, well, some people did. If you take player evaluation out of it and you're in the 15th round, I don't know why I keep using that exact round. And you don't.
What's your favorite round?
Your targets are mostly you're taking a backup running back that might break big, like we were just saying, or what is going to stop you, or you're thinking about taking a defense or a backup quarterback. If that's where you're comfortable, just you might sit there in time, and you might have to drop them by week 8. No matter where it is, there's a decent place to ask you, is this where I just take my favorite rookie that's on the board? Well, CD Lamb is my favorite rookie that's on a board. It's really unlikely. Ignore the player and situation evaluate, because nothing I can find evaluates situation well. This is, I think, a stronger point than I normally make it. Like Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup, I get it. That actually, I can find nothing to tell you that makes it less likely it's CD Lamb. It makes sense to me. It's very obvious that makes sense. But if it happens, you'll be like, okay, yeah, it can happen, because it can happen even with those things in place. So,
all right, so we're going to roll into an exercise. Sorry to cut you off there, but we just talked about 2 of these players, and I want you to pull these up while Jeremy explains the exercise. Can you pull up your projections for 2020 for the Dallas Cowboys?
I'm going to start with them. All right, so we're going to do.
I was talking to you about the projections.
Cool.
Yeah. So, Peter, recently I was, reading through some Twitter banter, and Kevin O'Brien, the FF engineer, had chimed in about a fantasy football drunk history idea, and you like
I love that idea.
as did many. I think it's an awesome idea, and I hope it materializes. And I think that for our purposes, we're going to do a little drunk future with some potentially unsettled situations, or at least situations that people have opinions on. So, Twitter may have some ideas that some of these incumbent players may need to budge up or move over. Is budge up a British phrase? I don't know.
I have no idea.
I'm from Kentucky. It's a Kentucky thing. Yeah.
Kentucky. That's right. Okay, so since you do kind of rankings, projections, even some schedule analysis, you may have some ideas about how you feel about these offenses that I'm going to name, but we're going to project those into the future as well. So what I want you to do for this exercise, this is just for you, is to quickly run through kind of the story of each of these three offenses in 2020. Maybe breaking down like a third of the season at a time. For instance, like, this guy on the offense will have a fast start, maybe not so much for this guy, and then this guy takes off midseason, and by the end, this is the guy you want, kind of thing.
All right.
And then, even though you're probably not drunk or incredibly drunk, I want you to tell me what is really going to happen in 2022. So we're going to project a couple years out, and I want this to, set your rational thought aside for a moment and just give me a perspective of something that might happen in Peter Howard's brain in 2022, a couple years from now. So the three offenses we're going to talk about are the Dallas Cowboys, as Kyle was talking about, the Denver Broncos, and then the Las Vegas Raiders. Okay. So if you just want to give a quick overview of kind of where you have, you don't have to give specific numbers, go into as much depth as you want on Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, Jarwin. You can throw in Zeke if you want, but we're mainly focused on passing offense here.
Sure. It's really important for me to say up front, I like all three of those wide receivers a lot. Like, they were great college evaluation prospects. I believe in all of them. That was the Rashad Penny came out, for example. So I lost all my first rounds, and Michael Gallup means that I came out of those rookie drafts a winner because I took him above everyone every time. So I want to say that up front.
Sure.
And also, I am not a draft capital zealot. Like, I'm the opposite. I'm the guy searching for those without draft capital that I like a lot. I like Brian Edwards this year, for example, T.Y. Hilton, Adam Thielen. But
Kyle, did you tell him to say all the names he said on the show? Because they're all
He's pretty much either nailed your sweet spot or mine on every name he's mentioned. So, yeah.
Sorry, Peter, continue.
NFL teams are different. NFL teams love draft capital. And they certainly don't. They don't even seem to like it when a player that they drafted late or got undrafted break out. It honestly seems to be a sore spot for them, and they try and get rid of them more often than they try to focus them. And this is a long way of saying that I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be the player you want over Michael Gallup. And I love Michael Gallup. And if you're getting him at value, he's a player who's proven he is good. That's the most important thing. But I also think CeeDee Lamb can be good. Now, the only counter to this is that NFL stats are pretty much twice as predictive of NFL performance across any measure, across any stat, than any college stat. So the best college profile, which CeeDee Lamb has a very good one, and not the best, but very good, is not as useful as a single NFL stat, which should lean me Michael Gallup. But I've consistently seen players drafted in the fourth round later get overturned, or teams attempt to overturn them with guys they draft higher. Guys, they tried to replace Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. People forget that. Everyone who doesn't like Adam Thielen still likes Stephon Diggs. They tried to replace him with Laquan Treadwell. Don't think they didn't want that, or that they didn't literally try to do that the year after both of them showed they were far and above average NFL talents. They tried to get rid of them. They tried to get a better player that they picked. Like that, if that nothing else tells you that NFL teams lean draft capital, not because of performance or players, it reads to me. Maybe there's more involved.
So you're saying...
So I think CeeDee Lamb is over Gallup. I think Amari Cooper leaves a charge. CeeDee Lamb has a decent shot to be that top 24 wide receiver this year and a crowded depth shot. I mean, we typically get 1 to 2 teams that produce 2 top 24 wide receivers. It's not consistently the same team year over year, but it does happen, and Dallas is a great situation to do it. And I could see Cooper and CD being those guys in 2020.
Okay, Peter, now
and also, I want to say Zeke is actually the player you want on this depth chart. That's what's going to happen. We spend all this offseason talking about the receiving game, and you really should have been looking at Zeke or Elliott.
You got Zeke in at the buzzer, but right before we zoomed forward 3 years. So now I want your drunk future of 2022. What does that offense look like? What's going to happen in Peter Howard's brain?
So you're just thinking about it like, okay, the 2022 season just ended, and you're telling everyone what just happened.
And you don't have to include, guys from Devi and stuff like that. You may say
Yeah,
that's
I
a
got you.
guy that's not there, but who do we want? What's a good strategy for owners now, or for owners looking at next year and a rebuild or something like that?
Amari Cooper's gone,
Okay.
and we've probably seen the height of his career arc. So at the end of 2022, we all now know that Amari Cooper is barely worth a first-round pick anymore. Michael Gallup never really produced again inside the top 24, but he has been consistently good, just increasing the tilting of people like me constantly talking about Cameron Meredith and Tyrell Williams and Michael Gallup. That's his career arc. CeeDee Lamb is a borderline top 12 wide receiver, and the real dynasty asset Ezekiel Elliott has declined significantly over the last couple of years. Still on the roster, really clogging it up for our favorite running back sleeper, which is probably not Tony Pollard at this point. It's Devi McFarlane or whoever Devi guy that's going to be drafted in about a year.
McFarlane's little brother. Yep.
Dak Prescott is still a top 12 quarterback. Everyone keeps talking about that. No one thinks he's a top 12 quarterback. Well, at the same time, not pointing out that top 12 quarterback isn't necessarily that important, even in Superflex. There you go. Oh, and Dallas does not get to the Super Bowl or take advantage of this window they have at all. They're going to be productive for fantasy, but they're not going to. They should.
I will tell you this right now, as a staunch Dallas Cowboys fan for many years, for what that's worth, I will say this as a business owner, that Jerry Jones, the business owner, has the best Jerry Jones, the general manager, that he can possibly buy, because it doesn't matter that they win Super Bowls. It matters that they stay in the conversation every year and stay relevant, because they could easily tear the thing down, rebuild it, win a Super Bowl. They have the talent, they have the recruiting, they have the skill. They don't, because they don't need to. They just have a money train. So why?
It's got to be good enough.
Actually, if we're in the 2022 off season, I would have to spend at least 5 minutes explaining why the recent reacquisition of Jason Witten isn't something you should be too excited about.
How many times would he have unretired by that year?
I know how many years have gone by. 2, so 2.
That's great.
And he'll still be better than most of the guys drafted as a random flyer inside the preseason that year, but still.
Well, all right, so we want to roll this into one of the other two teams?
Yeah, before the ghosts of Cameron Meredith in the preseason come to get me, let's move on to the Denver Broncos. We're looking Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, maybe KJ Hamler, Noah Fant. Give me an idea. I mean, running back situation if you want, but just give me a quick overview of what you're thinking about them this year, and then we'll fast forward.
It's difficult because I really don't know what to think about Drew Lock. I'm not a quarterback evaluator by rote, like I've tried, and I have not come up with something that makes me feel confident about quarterback too. But there are some guys I listen to a lot, and they're kind of divided, which is what makes Drew Lock difficult. I really respect Stompy's opinion. I think he's got that process. I don't understand his process at all, but he is a pretty good quarterback evaluator, and he really thinks he has potential to be a good quarterback. So I'm going to take his assumption. I also like Sean Slavin at Sean Slavin 22. He's a guy you should be following for quarterback evaluation. But let's just say Stompy's right about Drew Lock. I think I like that version of 2020 better. I think Cortland Sutton is the A.J. Brown and DJ Moore you wanted. I think he's a top 12 wide receiver. He's the biggest value jumper, and he pushes for top 1 overall if he were to do that this year.
Yes.
I think Fant would play the other role. I don't. Here's the thing. I believe the people who evaluate Jerry Jeudy. I can see his profile and equalize it to be a good profile. But the players around him, Cortland Sutton's been great. If Drew Lock is good, that's going to help out Cortland Sutton. I think those pair well together. Not necessarily top 12, but good enough. And I think Fant's in a really good situation to be a tight end this year. So I would see those two as the assets that you want. I do think Melvin Gordon is intended to and probably should be able to take over that role. And Philip Lindsay's going to struggle producing the same way he did in 2019, for example. I know I've got minimum time here. I think Royce Freeman will be a decent flyer, very, very, very late. just because there's uncertainty on that depth chart and using JJ Zacharyason's rules of the player we draft as a backup is rarely the guy we actually want. But I think Melvin Gordon leads the charge and produces a top 12 running back season as well. And Denver are a slightly unexpected team to be a high target for Dynasty and redraft picks, because if half of that happens, we'll want a lot of the Denver Broncos in 2020.
All right. Drunk Future 2022.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking Jerry Jeudy there, and I wish I wasn't. And I love the wide receiver they took late this year. I want to say Andy Isabella, but he's the guy who's
KJ
reminds me of.
Yeah,
but it's Hamler. He did what Andy Isabella did at college at an actually higher level, so you can't tank him for being outside of a good conference level.
Penn State.
So
It's really hard to see him get a role.
Passes.
But I want Hamler flyers in Dynasty a lot. And all of this leads me to the conclusion I'm not going to get a lot of Jerry Jeudy. And that feels a little AJ Brownish. I see it. I get it. And lots of people that are high on Jeudy I really respect, and they say a lot of great things about him. So I'm not telling anyone to I better take him off the list. But when I look at 2020, that's kind of what I see.
Have you seen him running routes in his underwear? It's like no other.
I don't watch football at all, let alone underwear videos. Come on, man.
The underwear videos on Twitter are my favorite. Or somebody doing
he's a great
some
player.
workout thing, like, look at me lifting an arm thing. Like,
I
did this thing, or the ball is coming out my head because I'm a quarterback, and that somehow is impactful to me throwing the football.
Well, they're all,
All right, Peter, fast forward.
Oh, okay. Fast forward.
Fast forward for us. Yeah, 2022. Where are the Broncos?
Proved to be a mirage. Cortland Sutton,
He's gone.
Still holding steady around the top 12, but never quite. He Odell Beckham. People lost faith in him because 2021 was less than 2020. This is
he the next Allen Robinson, just dealing with bad quarterbacks?
I'd my upside for him is more Odell Beckham. He proves it, and then we always fade on them because they don't, continue to be the best thing we've ever literally seen.
It's kind of like what Allen Robinson did, though.
Him like the next Kittle or whatever. Jerry Jeudy is everyone's favorite breakout candidate in the fourth year. And KJ Hamler is the other reason that I cry late at night. That's my 2022 prediction.
Sure, I love it. Yeah, I mean,
it basically becomes a Cortland Sutton and a top 5 tight end that we like by 2022.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with Sutton, is that he proves it early like A-Rob did, and then sure, A-Rob had some kind of real tough luck at quarterback and then some injury bad luck and a team switch, but he's pretty much maintained for the most part. He's never dropped out of the top.
I know that suggests that he ever had good luck at quarterback. I don't think he's ever had good luck at quarterback.
That's true. Penn State Hackenberg was about as good as it gets, and that's pretty rough.
Yeah, he has been awesome on all 5 teams he's been on in the NFL.
Well, so is Brandon Cooks. No one likes him either. Here's the thing, though. I have arguments with Jacob Rickroad about this, and I'm name dropping because, I'm a big fan. But this is how I think the good quarterback to good wide receiver thing is a little misleading. I don't think we've seen a lack of Allen Robinson's ceiling. I think we've seen top 12 potential, which he is. But DeAndre Hopkins, Odell Beckham, where he was for a little while, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, I don't see that for Allen Robinson. I don't think his quarterback has held him back that far. I think we've seen pretty decently what he could do in great offenses. Now, if you're going to top 5% of offenses ever, then sure, Allen Robinson could fucking eat it up. But I don't think Bortles and Trubisky have held him back so much that he could have been Julio Jones or anything. I think that's a very different kettle of fish.
Yeah,
and he got the volume. He got the volume too, so it's not like the quarterback was so bad that he could only give him 90 targets. So
yeah, I do think there's a relationship between quarterback and wide receiver production, very obviously. I just don't think it's as varied. Because the counter to that is, but if you get thrown a lot of bad balls, that's not a great thing. And that's essentially what he's had to deal with. So he's a phenomenal player.
Well, then you look at Jalen Reagor, right? Legitimately. So he played college football about maybe 13 miles from me. Not 13 miles from me. So, like, yeah, dude played for a quarterback who literally just is not really a quarterback. He's really a scrambling guy who can throw the ball a little bit, and that's what he's got. And dude produced at a college level with a guy not throwing to him. So you get some of these guys who have that situation where the guy is just terrible. Nothing what you're mentioning is anywhere close to as bad as the quarterback Jalen Reagor had in college. And so,
Right.
you're still talking about real, true first-round talent quarterbacks throwing. And as good or bad as we say they are, they're still one of the 40th best players to do that in the real world. Like, they're still pretty good. So if somebody has Blake Bortles throwing, it's not that far difference.
Now Reagor gets the upgrade of Jalen Hurts. Go ahead.
No, Rager's like my favorite wide receiver prospect in this class. I love his profile. His last year is a concern, though, because frankly, when you level up everything, we've seen it can be bad in an imperfect situation, and everything's just get a little bit harder on top of that. So it's not that it's not a concern that last year is a worry, but because he was so good the other 2 years, like I'm willing to just write it off. Like you're allowed to struggle in a bad situation some years, But it is a concern.
That team has not had like a true staunch number one quarterback since Andy Dalton. And, when you think about what we're doing, it's a struggle. So, Jeremy, do you want to do the third team here? Or is this, do we have time to do that third team?
Yeah, we can do one more. Let's finish off with let's do the Las Vegas Raiders. So we're going to look at Henry Ruggs, Brian Edwards, Tyrell Williams, Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller. Throw in Derek Carr since you talked about Dak and Locke. And let's go quickly with 2022 or 2020, and then we'll fast forward.
No, Lynn Bowden?
You can throw in Lynn Bowden. Yeah. We've lightly been going on.
Carr with Mariota, like by week 4. No, like I don't mind Derek Carr. Like I think he's fine. I've always kind of had a soft spot for Mariota. I think he's a lot better than he's been able to show, but he plays a certain position, which I do think the team could take advantage of. The Raiders have been kind of a mystery in that they've made a lot of bad mistakes and it's hurt them a lot, but they still have managed to kind of turn some stuff around. Like I'm not sure if they're good masquerading as terrible or terrible masquerading as, potentially good. I'm not sure which way it goes. I'm really not. But yeah, I'm going to say Carr keeps his job. I'm going to say the volume keeps up. I think Harriet Ruggs. Herman.
Still Herman.
He went to the best situation for him. I don't know if everyone feels that way, but I think Raiders are a team who are going to want to use him. And I think anyone that drafts a wide receiver that high want to use him, but they're willing to bend to what he needs. Like they're going to want him seriously. They're going to hyper-focus him. The Raiders are the only team I know that have actively not targeted their best player because they didn't want him to be their best player. And that's what I mean about stupid, smart, or smart, stupid. I don't know which way it goes with the Raiders because the way Amari Cooper wasn't targeted in that offense was just, it's the only instance I can literally find where we know who the good wide receiver is and the team's deliberately not focused. And that's why targets work as a talent stat. Targets go to talent. They must have artificially been forcing targets away from him because we know he's good. He's proved it on his second team. He proved it on the Raiders 2 years before that. No, Julio, definitely good and definitely better than the rest of what they had. So it had to be artificial. What the hell's that about? We're going to not target our best player. Why? Shut up. Okay. Tyrell Williams is really good as well, but that's underrated. Anyway, so I think Mr. Ruggs could have like a Marcus Brown season. So incredibly impressive where he's coming from and considering his college role, but I don't think he gets any better than that. But just in 2020, I think there's going to be a lot of, hey, see, I told you about Ruggs. I think he's very capable of making plays. That's what his college production shows, and the Raiders are going to put him in a situation to do that. Darren Waller's a top 5 tight end, and I don't know why everyone keeps trying to make tight end more complicated than it is. Just Jacobs is going to continue not to get targeted. It doesn't make sense. Shouldn't happen. He's going to have a year where it happens, but I don't think it's next year. top 12 running back though still, because he's an amazing rusher too. I don't see a lot of changes in terms of overall fantasy or overall team results, frankly, next year for them. But I think they're going to have a lot of exciting players on there like they did last year, and continue to be a confusing team that's nowhere near advancing to the Super Bowl or anything like that. And I think we're definitely talking about a quarterback change in an Andy Dalton-ish way by the end of next season, because Derek Carr's fine. Like, I mean, and by fine in the NFL standards is you're literally in the top 0.5% of players at that position. But by NFL standards, you're in the bottom 0.5%. And that's going to, especially as his career works on, you start thinking about another contract, it's going to be thought of as more of a hindrance to the team, like an Andy Dalton situation ended up working out to be.
So your 2020 is you've got Henry Ruggs as the lead receiver, and you've got Darren Waller as your second receiver.
I've got Waller as a receiver you want on your fantasy team. I think Ruggs is going to be good.
Number one.
Yeah.
And then fast forward.
Yeah, but before we fast forward, I think I want to highlight your point about the smart, stupid, smart, because I think it's actually insightful in that they're clearly, I think they're smart, stupid. So they're drafting smart. They're getting Amari Cooper, Khalil Mack. They're getting a Derek Carr who's serviceable in the second round. They're getting a Bryan Edwards this year who a lot of us like. They're taking smart shots on Lynn Bowden. Like they're making good moves, and then after that they do stupid things. And that's,
I think
like,
Bryan Edwards. Speaking of that, I think Bryan Edwards is the wide receiver I want on that team. I don't know
we'll talk
it's going to feel that way in 2020.
Yeah, we'll talk about him in your fast forward, I assume. But but I think the opposite side of that smart stupid is the stupid smart, and that's like the Chicago Bears. It's like they're wasting all their first, second, third round picks, and then they're trading for a Khalil Mack. They're hitting on an Allen Robinson in free agency. Like they're getting lucky, as opposed to being smart and doing stupid things.
Yeah, but Raiders are making such terrible, and yet they're getting success out of it. And I'm not going to pretend I never wanted, and I'm not saying I know how to run an NFL. Like I literally would never want to try to do that. I'm not trying to NFL analyst. I'm trying to fantasy, which is a very different thing. It's a lot easier and it's a lot lower level. So I'm not going to pretend I know near as much of football as anyone on that coaching staff. They know what they're doing compared to me, but it's incredibly confusing, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Just from an outside perspective, I'm like, why would you? But they are getting success out of it. So like, it's interesting. It would be interesting to see what they did. There's a lot of potential there. I don't see it coming to fruition because despite being smart in a lot of the ways you're saying, I think I don't know how that works out. It doesn't seem to be smart decision making on another level as well. Like you don't bleed talent because you don't want that to be your talent, right? And cheaply as well. They gave Amari Cooper away, basically.
Well, but the thing a lot of people don't understand about the business stuff is that sometimes you literally can't afford the upfront contracts, and that's how Oakland was.
Maybe, yeah.
So like there is a little bit to that. So I'm not going to get too far into. We're in the middle of a game.
Yeah.
Size.
I forgot, Karen.
But yeah, like sometimes it's literally cash flow. I can't afford to pay Khalil Mack $40 million this year. I can't. I don't have the payroll. So let's just go on now, though.
Hold on. So the smart stupid reminds me of the Raiders, reminds me of the Cowboys, and I'm not going to let you respond to that. All right. So let's fast forward now, Peter, to 2022, and let's talk about how awesome Bryan Edwards is.
Oh, Bryan Edwards is clearly the wide receiver one. I think.
Thank you.
I'd like to say Waller is still relevant, but I do think.
Yeah.
And Edwards has. I'm just going to go on Edwards. Edwards is a T.Y. Hilton. Very different type of player, but he's a player that's just going to be dominant on a middling offense that you keep thinking has better potential, and that's what the Raiders proved to be over these last 3 years. And where they were always kind of quite there, but they were always making slightly strange decisions that seemed to hold them back from getting out of the bracket they're in, if you know what I mean. With the Colts, it was just get Andrew Luck some protection, please. And with the Raiders, it's like, I don't know what you're doing here. You're getting success in weird ways, but could we just focus on, getting normal success? Because that seems to work. But I still think Waller is like a French top 12 tight end. I think Bryan Edwards is like high value top 24 wide receiver. Derek Carr's probably replaced, which has produced some concerns that either Waller, Brian Edwards, continuing to produce even as they have done over the last 2 seasons. I think Henry Ruggs is a really interesting thing people say online when they want to pretend film doesn't matter. I'm pointing at myself when I say that. I will be doing that. But yeah, he's going to be a very good NFL player, and I think that's where he will find himself in 2022. It's like, this guy's good for the team. He does great things. Team-oriented guy. The Raiders love him. An upscale Philip Dorsett, because that's basically what he's done in the NFL as well. Upscale. Don't get too angry. Like a better version. Okay.
Any comments on 53-year-old Hunter Renfrow in 2023 or 2022?
I forgot him in 2020. Like, I get the Hunter Renfrow stuff. I really do. I would love to love it. Because I love those low drafted guys. I love those volume guys. There's significant reason to think that, he has his upside. But for me, his upside is Cole Beasley, who's also significantly underrated. And I'm not going to Hunter. Like, the people who like Renfrow like him a lot harder than that. And so, like, I'm just kind of out. And I think that just proves true in 2020. By 2022, he's one of those liars. Like, hey, why don't you go draft some more Renfrow on the Raiders? But again, I don't think he's a bad NFL player. I think the team's very happy with him, and they're going to continue to be happy with him. He's just not going to be a main feature of their offense.
Yep.
And I'm trying to incorporate smarter NFL stuff into which is weird because I'm not an NFL. I don't care. I make contracts. I'm not trying to do better than the coaches. At all. Wouldn't be that arrogant. I'll be a little arrogant, but not that arrogant. But like, Rich Harbaugh mentioned this recently about Christian Kirk, and Scott Barrett and also Adam Harstead were talking about it on the Fantasy Points podcast, thinking about the replaceability of targets. NFL teams can replace the role. Now, the role Renfrow is eking out and might still continue to eke out is impressive for him as a player, but the team has to worry a lot less about if he's not there or if they use someone else.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of the fate of that player. I think Christian Kirk can do it, but I'm not doing that right now. Do a little more than that. But it's like, it's like a Cole Beasley, incredibly impressive for the role he plays. It's just the NFL cares less about that role than, say, the Mike Evans role or what they want Mr. Ruggs to be and what Brian Edwards actually can be. But anyway, we're getting way too far off of the 2020 game here. That's the end of my 2020.
Now I am convinced now, Peter, that Kyle provided you a show sheet of players to name. When Cole Beasley sneaks in there, that's Kyle's guy.
Right?
So,
you have not named a player that doesn't just hit either my heart or Jeremy's or both.
Wow, that's what I'm trying to do, man. I'm just trying to shoot arrows right through the heart.
We just know how much you follow us and pay attention to all of our musings.
That's right. Well, Peter, thank you for engaging in that little drunk future exercise. I hope it was a little bit of fun. It might reveal some kind of underlying motivations or expectations or even biases. It'll be interesting to maybe revisit this, at least on our end, and we'll throw it at you in a year or 2 years or even in 2022. But at the very least, it shows how kind of unpredictable some of this can be and how fun it can really be to shoot our shot and see what sticks.
Well, we appreciate all of this, and I just got to look up and see what time's on the clock, and just that only taking our session, but maybe probably the next person's session. It's okay. Jeremy's new at this clinical psychology thing, so he might not actually have anybody in the lobby waiting for us. We don't know. But I am seeing him tap on his notebook. I am seeing him tap on his notebook, which is usually an indicator that our show is coming to a close. Jeremy, you want to tell us some more about our guest here and where we can find his content?
Absolutely. So if you haven't heard of Peter Howard or followed his stuff, then you're probably finishing last in your league, or at least not having a good time. Unless we're talking Scott Fishbowl, then you can follow him. You might be down there with him, but Peter, we've had no, you're okay. We've had a blast with you. We can find your content on DLF. We can find some of your stuff on Player Profiler. Tell us again any parting words, anything you have to say, any last piece of advice before we let you go.
I would just like to brag that I completely avoided any kind of psychoanalysis, and so I continue to be 100% on that. No, I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me on. Had a blast talking to you guys. As for my content, I don't know. If you enjoy any of it, you can find me at Howdy, my podcast at Dynasty Crossroads. I'm always interested in talking about fantasy football or just having some fun around that subject anytime. Thanks very much, guys, and see you around, I guess. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I have plenty of content to go back through on the recording and diagnose you accordingly. So
Appreciate that.
So thanks again. We'll talk on Twitter, obviously. That's all we have time for today. Follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Self Help. Our great producer, Rich, at Streaming Rich. Poor Kyle, at Dogleg Brewer. I'm at Jared Schwob. We'll see you next session. All right.
All right, man, that was fun.
Very nice,
was
guys.
A lot of fun.
Thanks,